maybe. Or disbelief that someone had actually stopped. Water dribbled down her chin, but she drank, her fingers clinging to his wrist like it was the last real thing left in the world. A few feet back, the other ranchers muttered. One spat. Another turned his horse around and rode off like he was late for something. Cowards. Fletcher didn't even look at them. He was already wrapping his arms beneath her knees and shoulders. Her head dropped against his chest like she'd been waiting her whole life for someone to hold her that way. "What's your name?" he asked softly, already carrying her toward his horse. Her voice cracked. "Georgia." He nodded once. "All right then, Georgia. I got you." The sun blazed above them, beating down like it had something to prove. The ground shimmered. Heat bounced off the dust like smoke off coals. Fletcher moved fast but careful, his boots crunching over gravel and sage, his breath steady, his eyes scanning ahead. He knew where the water was. A thin stream shaded by cottonwoods about half a mile out. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Her dress fluttered with each step, snagging on thorns and branches as he carried her across the dry wash. Her head lolled. She was slipping under. "No, you don't," he said, tightening his grip. "You stay with me now." By the time he reached the trees, her body was shaking. Fever had taken hold, hard and fast. He laid her down by the stream, dipped his handkerchief in the cool water, and pressed it to her side. Blood seeped through the cloth, deep and dark. She flinched, gasped, and her eyes opened wide. "They took them," she whispered. "My babies. Ellen and Elijah. I hid them before the men came." Fletcher's heart punched against his ribs. "Kids?" She nodded, her breath hitching. 7 and 5. "My husband's dead. I was bringing them west. We were supposed to start over." He didn't ask what happened. Not yet. He could see it all in the way her mouth trembled when she spoke their names. She passed out before he could say another word. Fletcher worked fast. He cleaned the wound, packed it with wet cloth, and cut strips from his own shirt to bind it tight. The bullet had gone through, thank God. Still it was a mess. Too much blood. Too much heat. All night he sat by her side, feeding her sips of water when she stirred, chasing away the fever best he could with damp cloth and whispered prayers. She moaned in her sleep, clawing at dreams he couldn't see. Once she screamed, voice raw and wild, "Don't touch me. Don't." Then she wept, small and shaking. Fletcher didn't leave. He just held her hand and kept the fire going. When the sun broke the horizon in a blaze of gold and fire, she finally opened her eyes. The fever had broken. She looked at him like she didn't know whether to be afraid or thankful. "You're still here," she whispered. "I said I had you." Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't empty. It was full of all the things they hadn't said yet, all the things they didn't know how to. "My children," she said again, her voice like torn paper. "We have to find them." Fletcher looked her dead in the eye. "We will." He meant it like a vow. Later that day, after he fed her wild berries and helped her drink from the stream, he fashioned a sling from his saddle blanket. She couldn't ride on her own yet, not with that wound. So he hoisted her gently onto his horse and climbed up behind her, holding her upright with one strong arm. She leaned back against him, exhausted. "You don't have to do this," she murmured. "I know." "Then why?" His voice was low in her ear. "Because I couldn't ride away." The sun beat down as they rode slow, careful. Dust rose behind them in lazy spirals. Georgia said little, but her head rested against his chest like she was starting to believe he wouldn't let her fall. By dusk, they reached a small ranch on the edge of the low hills. It belonged to Maria, a Mexican widow who owed Fletcher more than a few favors. She took one look at Georgia's pale face and blood-soaked dress and ushered them inside without a single question. While Maria cleaned the wound and fed her broth, Fletcher went into town for supplies. He came back with coffee, salt, and a map. That night, Georgia slept in a real bed. Her skin wasn't burning anymore. Her hands had stopped shaking. But her heart, Fletcher could tell, was still held together by threads. He sat near the window, rifle across his lap, watching the stars. Then her voice broke the silence. "I remember you." Turned, surprised. "You rode through our town once." You bought peaches from my stand. Fletcher frowned, thinking, then smiled. You wore a yellow ribbon in your hair. Her lips curved just barely. You were handsome. He chuckled softly. You should have said something. I was married. His smile faded, not completely. And now? She looked down. Fever took him last year. But even before that, he wasn't kind. Fletcher stood and walked over to the bed. He crouched beside her, not touching, just close. You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to. I want to, she said, barely above a whisper. So she told him just enough. And he listened. And when he swore again, quiet and solemn, "We'll find your children," she didn't ask why he cared. She just reached for his hand. And this time, neither of them let go. They left before the sun rose. The world was still gray, silent, waiting. Georgia was wrapped in Maria's old quilt, perched in front of Fletcher on the saddle. The sorrel mare moved slow and steady, her hooves thudding softly against the dirt trail. Georgia's back pressed to Fletcher's chest, her hands gripping the horn as the desert rolled open in front of them. She hadn't said much. Not since the promise. Not since she took his hand and didn't let go. Fletcher didn't push her. He knew the silence wasn't empty, it was full of children's names, nightmares she couldn't explain, and the throb in her side that reminded her she'd been left to die. They rode through low grass and broken rock, the land stretching wide and endless, everything the same shade of gold and bone. Hawks circled high. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out. Georgia didn't flinch. When the sun finally pushed above the rim of the world, Fletcher pointed toward a narrow trail cutting across the ridgeline. Cal Bynes rides express through here. He sees everything that moves east. If your kids pass through Santa Rosa, he'll know. Georgia didn't look at him, but her fingers tightened slightly around the saddle horn. They reached the trading post by late morning. Fletcher swung down and helped Georgia dismount carefully. She leaned on him, jaw clenched, hiding the pain but not well enough. Cal was already outside, cleaning his boots with the side of a rusted spade. He looked up, squinted. Fletcher Ward. Thought you were long gone. I need a name. Cal's gaze drifted to Georgia, her dress faded and bandaged. Then back to Fletcher. A wagon passed 3 days ago. 2 kids. Boy with a limp. Girl with a necklace. Stayed out of town, didn't trade. Georgia's breath caught. They were with Pike Crenshaw, Cal added. Horse runner. Used to haul for Prescott. Owes more debt than he can pay. Man's been running east, ducking the law. Was he armed? Fletcher asked. Cal nodded. Always. And meaner when he's scared. Georgia stepped forward, her voice low and raw. They didn't cry? Cal looked at her, surprised. The girl sang to the boy, real soft, like she was trying to make the fear go quiet. Georgia turned away, hand to her mouth. Fletcher stared down the road like he could already see blood on it. Back on the trail, the air had changed. It wasn't quiet anymore. It was tight, like the desert was holding its breath. Fletcher rode with one hand on the reins, the other steady near his rifle. Georgia sat straighter now, her fever gone but something deeper rising, something sharper than pain. Her voice came soft. He wasn't one of the men who shot me. Fletcher tilted his head. He wasn't with them. But if he's got my children, he bought them. Fletcher didn't speak. He just nodded once, jaw tight. They made camp that night beneath a crooked juniper tree. Fletcher built the fire while Georgia folded her quilt near the flames. She moved slowly but without asking for help. When he handed her a cup of coffee, she stared into it like it might tell her what to do next. They took them for money, she said. Not because they're worth something to them. Just to sell. They're still alive, Fletcher said, steady as steel. If they weren't, we'd have heard already. I should be the one going after them, she snapped. You're not strong enough. I don't care. He stood. You think I'm doing this to make you feel small? She looked up at him, firelight flickering in her eyes. I think you're afraid I'll slow you down. I'm afraid if you tear that wound open again, you'll bleed out in the dirt and your kids will never know you fought for them. Her shoulders dropped slightly. The wind tugged at her hair. I'm not trying to save you, Georgia, he said quietly. I'm trying to help you finish saving them. She didn't answer. But later, as they lay beside the fire, not touching but close, she said something so quietly he almost missed it. I never asked you what you lost. He stared at the stars. I lost someone who waited too long for help that never came. The silence that followed didn't hurt. It understood. By morning, the trail had thinned into red dust and rock. Fletcher found a patch of broken twigs and hoof prints leading east toward the rim. He dismounted and knelt down. Wagon wheel. Wide track. Not even a day ahead. George's fingers trembled around the saddle horn. Then we push. They rode until the sun was angry in the sky. Then they saw it. A thin line rising near the trees. Fletcher signaled her to stop. They moved through the brush on foot now, slow and careful, every step calculated. He pointed through the leaves. The wagon. A broken wheel propped on a log. A small cook fire. 3 men. 1 pacing. 1 sharpening a blade. The third leaning on a stump with his back turned. No children in sight. Georgia's heart thundered in her chest. She wanted to run. Wanted to scream. Fletcher leaned close. I'll draw them out. When you see this, he pulled a red bandana from his pocket, tie it to the branch when it's safe. She nodded, eyes fixed and furious. He moved fast, wide, quiet. Circling the camp while Georgia pressed into the rocks, every breath held in her throat. Then she saw it. The cloth fluttering in the tree. She ran. Behind the wagon, beneath a canvas flap, she saw it, a tiny hand gripping a doll. A boy curled beneath the blanket. Elijah, she breathed. Ellen. They blinked, dazed, confused. Then a cry burst from Ellen's throat. Mama. Georgia wrapped them both in her arms, shaking as they clung to her. She didn't feel the pain in her side. She didn't feel anything but them. A gunshot cracked through the air. Then another. She pulled them tighter. Fletcher was fighting. Shouting. Boots slammed into dirt. Men cursed. Then quiet. Georgia peeked around the wagon. Fletcher was standing over 2 men. One limped. The other moaned, crawling in the dust. The third, Crenshaw, was face down, not moving. Fletcher was breathing hard, blood running from his temple. He turned and saw her, saw the children, and something in his face broke wide open. She stood, holding Ellen in one arm, Elijah in the other. He stepped toward her, dust rising at his feet. You came, Ellen whispered. Georgia smiled, tears falling. I told you I would. Elijah looked up at Fletcher. Who's he? Fletcher crouched down, blood still trickling. Just a man lucky enough to find your mama. And that's how they left that place. Fire rising behind them, the wagon burning slow and low. They didn't look back. They reached the river at dusk. The water moved slow, soft against the stones, like it was trying not to wake anything. Georgia sat beside the fire holding both children close, her back to the world, her eyes never leaving the flames. Ellen leaned into her side, quiet as sleep. Elijah pressed his face into her ribs, too tired to cry. Across the fire, Fletcher stripped his shirt off, using a rag to wipe blood from his brow. His ribs ached, his knuckles were bruised, and one shoulder burned where a blade had skimmed his skin. But he didn't complain. He never did. He glanced over at Georgia. She hadn't said much since the fight. She'd barely looked at him. Not because she didn't want to. Because she didn't know how. When the kids finally drifted off, curled beneath the quilt with their arms wrapped around each other like a prayer, Georgia stood slowly. Her body was stiff, stitched with pain, but she moved like she was used to it. She walked over, wrapped in silence, and sat beside Fletcher without a word. For a long while, they didn't speak. The fire snapped between them, casting gold across her face. I thought they'd forget me, she said finally. They didn't. I thought I forgot myself. You didn't. She stared into the flames. I don't know where to go. You don't have to. She turned to him. You think this is over? You think I can just take them to some town and pretend we didn't just climb out of a grave? No, he looked at her. But I think we don't have to climb back into one either. She swallowed hard. I don't have a name left. You've got two of them sleeping by that fire. And what about you? His voice was quiet. I'll stay if you want me to. Georgia looked away, but her eyes filled with something, fear, maybe, or hope. Sometimes they looked the same. Later that night, when the children were warm and dreaming, she sat brushing Ellen's hair. Fletcher watched from the edge of the clearing, arms crossed, eyes soft. You always this stubborn? She asked, not looking up. Only when I mean it. She paused, set the brush down, and faced him. Why'd you really stop? Back then. When you saw me. He walked over, crouched down beside her, careful not to wake the kids. I lost someone once. My mother. Waited every day by the road for my father to come home. He never did. One winter he went to settle a debt. Disappeared. She kept waiting years after Hope died. Just kept waiting. You remind me of her. Her eyes searched his. You think I'm like someone who waited too long? No, his voice cracked. I think you're someone who survived. She looked down. Her hands were shaking again, not from fear, but from the weight of being seen. I didn't expect kindness, she whispered. I'm not doing this out of kindness. Then what? He didn't answer right away. Then, finally, because if someone had found my mother bleeding in the dirt and walked away, I'd never forgive them. The firelight flickered across her cheeks. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. She leaned forward and rested her head against his chest, right where his heartbeat lived. And he didn't move. Didn't say a word. Just let her be held. The next morning, mist hung low over the river. Georgia rose first. She found the children by the water's edge tossing pebbles and giggling softly. Elijah's limp was more pronounced, but he didn't complain. Ellen whispered to her doll and smiled at the sound of the current. Fletcher sat by the fire, rubbing down the horse. Georgia joined him, her boots damp with dew. You sleep? He asked. I did, she said. Better than I thought I could. They'll need shoes. And coats. There's a woman in Pine Hollow, she said. Sewed for my sister once. Might still have a machine. It's close. Half a day if we cut through the West Ridge. He stood. Then that's where we'll go. But she didn't move. Her eyes lingered on the trees, distant and full of history. I don't know if I can show my face there. He turned to her. No one has a right to judge you. They will. They don't matter. She crossed her arms. They'll see a widow with 2 children and no land. A woman who ran. Who survived something ugly. He stepped closer. Then let them remember it. You didn't leave because you broke. You left because you lived. Georgia stared at him. I want them to have more than what I had, she said. A house with real walls. A life that doesn't start and end with pain. They will. Not if I do it alone. You're not alone. The wind stirred, lifting her hair gently. She looked up at him, eyes heavy with fear and wonder. You mean to stay? I do. Her throat worked. You take all of us? He didn't even blink. I already have. By evening, Pine Hollow came into view. 2 rows of clapboard houses. A silent church bell. Fences that needed painting. And the smallest hint of safety. Georgia led them to a house at the edge of town, half covered by a bent old oak. A woman opened the door, wiping flour on her apron. She stared at Georgia for a long moment. Martha, Georgia said. The woman blinked. There's a face I never thought I'd see again. I need work, she said. My children need clothes. Martha opened the door without another word. Then come in. Inside, the air smelled of bread and soap. Ellen clung to Georgia's dress until Martha handed her a slice of warm cornbread. Elijah took it with both hands and leaned against Fletcher's leg like he belonged there. Martha let them stay in the back room in exchange for help with mending and baking. It wasn't charity. It was quiet grace. And Fletcher found work nearby, repairing fences and feeding cattle, dust on his boots every night and eggs in his saddlebags by morning. Weeks passed. Georgia's hands steadied. Her eyes cleared. She started helping at the mercantile. Measured sugar. Folded brown paper. Didn't flinch when men spoke to her. Some looked away. Some nodded politely. 1 or 2 smiled. And one night, under a warm sky, as the children played with sticks beneath the porch, Fletcher carved a small wooden horse and handed it to Elijah. The boy's eyes lit up like morning. Georgia watched from the steps. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "The trail? The quiet?" "Sometimes," he said. "But not like I thought I would." "What changed?" He looked at her and didn't look away. "You did." She sat beside him, folded her hand into his. "I want to marry you," she said. He blinked. "You sure?" "I've lived too long being told what I was worth. I want to choose it now. I choose you." Fletcher didn't smile. He just nodded. "Then we'll make it a good life. Not perfect, but ours." The wedding was simple. No music. No ribbons. No crowd. Just the oak tree behind Martha's house and the wind in the leaves. Georgia wore a dress Martha let down and rehemmed, with a blue ribbon in her hair borrowed from Ellen's doll. Fletcher wore his best shirt, scrubbed clean at the collar. Elijah stood beside him, stuffed inside a jacket 3 sizes too big, looking like a boy trying to be a man. Ellen clutched a basket of wildflowers and tried not to spill them. The preacher came from the next town over. He didn't ask questions. He just opened his book, cleared his throat, and said, "When 2 souls survive fire and still want to walk through life together, it's not a wedding. It's a resurrection." They said their vows with eyes locked, hands shaking only a little. Georgia didn't cry. Not until the preacher said, "You may kiss your bride." Then she did. Not because she was afraid, but because, for the first time in her life, she wasn't. The kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't for show. It was the kind that sealed wounds. The kind that made time stop for just a second and say, "You've earned this." That night, the children slept wrapped in quilts in the back room. The air still smelled of yeast bread and pine sap. Georgia stood in the doorway, her body lit soft by the flicker of the lamp. Fletcher turned to her, his voice low and awed. "You look like someone I dreamed up." She stepped in, closing the door behind her. "You feel like someone I built from nothing." They didn't say much more that night. They didn't need to. Years passed like pages in a well-read book. Georgia took over the mercantile when the owners retired. She learned the rhythm of shelves and customers, of weighing beans and measuring bolts of cloth, of carrying herself with quiet pride. Fletcher planted vegetables out back and raised chickens that squawked like they ran the town. He fixed things for neighbors without charging. Took Elijah fishing. Built Ellen a rocking chair for her doll. And every night he came home. Sometimes dusty. Sometimes tired. Always sure. They built a swing on the porch that creaked in the wind and held them both. And when the sky turned violet and the cicadas sang low, Georgia would lean into Fletcher's side. He'd press a kiss to her temple like it was a habit, like it had always been. Ellen learned to read. Elijah's limp got better each spring. They didn't have much, but what they had was honest. And it was theirs. One summer evening, Ellen asked, "Mama, what was your wedding like?" Georgia smiled, peeling apples for a pie. "Small." "Did you have music?" "No, baby. Just wind and truth." "Did Daddy cry?" Fletcher grunted from the porch. "No." Georgia chuckled. He blinked hard, though. Ellen twirled, the hem of her dress catching sunlight. "I want one like that." Georgia paused, knife hovering midair. "A wedding?" "No. A love." She looked out the window at Fletcher. He was fixing the hinge on the chicken coop, sweat on his brow, shirt sleeves rolled up. "You will," she whispered. "But don't ever settle for anything less." Later that night, Georgia stood on the porch watching the moon climb over the ridge. Fletcher joined her, arm brushing hers. The swing rocked beneath them like it always had. She looked up at him. "Did you ever think we'd get here?" "No," he said. "But I fought like hell for it." She leaned into him. "You carried me once." "I still would," he said. "Every day if I had to." She smiled. "I know." And in the hush between words, the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like home. If this story moved you, if it made you believe again in second chances, in quiet strength, in real love that doesn't scream but stays, then don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story that grabs your heart and won't let go. Thank you for riding with us. We'll see you next time.